Chapter 15, Part 2, Ethics. For me, ethics are a way of providing some guidelines for behavior. And just because something is legal doesn't mean it's necessarily good to do. And if you are fortunate enough, inshallah, we will all be fortunate enough to get the jobs that we want. But if you are fortunate enough to get a job in one of the media industries, there are, no matter what industry that is, there are some ethical concerns about revealing information and the kind of information that's revealed. And not all media is necessarily responsible journalism. And actually, in the film Men in Black, which maybe some of you remember, there is sort of a joke about supermarket tabloids. But in the movie Men in Black, supermarket tabloids are presented as sort of a paragon of virtue, something good. Here you go.
These are the hot sheets?
Best investigative reporting on the planet. Go ahead, read the New York Times if you want to. They get lucky sometimes. Thanks, Manny.
Cannot believe you're looking for tips in the supermarket tabloids.
Not looking for. Found.
Right. All responsible news outlets have some type of strict codes of conduct. If you start working for some news outlet, they'll have rules about accepting gifts. For doing a review, you should not be accepting any gifts. For doing reviews, you shouldn't pay for interviews, for example. Everyone has to abide by the same legal rules when it comes to things like libel or obscenity or pornography or something like that. But not everyone has to adhere to the same ethical standards, and not everyone does adhere to the same ethical standards. What you're seeing right here are the code of ethics that are put out by the SPJ, Society for Professional Journalists. And we have this interesting situation in the United States where you do not need a license to be a journalist. I don't think you should need a license to be a journalist. You need a license to be a doctor or to practice law or something like that. But anyone can call themselves a journalist, which creates some problems for society. But I think ultimately it's a good rule that we do not license journalists in the United States. And if you violate one of these codes of ethics, you might lose your job, but you could get hired by some other media outlet. You could get hired by someone else. But take a look at this. I'm going to post this on Canvas, and I really, really encourage you to take a look at it, especially if you are at all interested in going into one of the media industries as a potential career. There's some really, really good and very specific guidelines here. Seek truth and report it. That's the first kind of mission statement, right? Seek truth and report it. And look at this first point, the very first point here. Take responsibility. Journalists should take responsibility for the accuracy of their work. Verify information before releasing it. Use original sources whenever possible. Okay. I'm not going to go through all of them. I'll put this on Canvas, but I really, really encourage you to take a look at that. I'm going to talk a little bit about digital photo editing. I'm going to show some examples of manipulated photos that I think relate to the issue of ethics. And then I'm going to talk about some famous, how am I doing on time? I'm going to take a look at some different sort of ethical cases, ethical lapses that will maybe, inshallah, provide you some instruction. Because of new technologies and digital technology, it's very, very easy to alter a photograph. You know this, we all know this. You could change the color, the saturation, the exposure. I think we all kind of do this a little bit with our selfies to make sure that we are presented in the best possible light. And some photo manipulation might be done to make a better photograph, to crop it, to adjust the color. But what's acceptable? At what point do you actually change the meaning of the photograph by changing it? And should you alert viewers when you have altered photographs? Here's a famous case. This is now a legendary case, 1994, O.J. Simpson. O.J. Simpson, famous football player. He was an actor briefly. I mean, an actor for a while, but I mean, his name was really known. He really established himself on the football field. He's accused of murdering his wife, and I think there was another individual as well, another young guy. These two magazines both chose to put O.J. Simpson and his mugshot on the cover when he was actually arrested and formally charged. I remember this. This was a big case. This was like the biggest media spectacle I can remember, certainly when it comes to someone being put on trial. Time magazine took the photograph and altered it a little bit to make it look darker. They thought that they were making a better photograph, just sort of increasing the contrast. Well, emphasizing the darkness of the man, making him look darker, plays into some very, very long-standing and unfortunate racist beliefs in society. You have made the man look darker. He is blacker. He is scarier, presumably, because he is darker. And Time magazine was correctly criticized for making this adjustment. I think it was unethical, despite whatever they said, whatever they thought. The photo on the right is a little more realistic. That's probably been tweaked a little bit too. But the photo on the right is more realistic as to what O.J. Simpson actually looked like. And then Time magazine chose to make him look darker. This photograph, now this is not digital manipulation, but I bring this up because it is a historical example about trusting photographs. They say, you should believe photographs because photographs are presumably more accurate information than just words. This very, very famous photo, soldiers raising the flag after a battle of Iwo Jima. I assume you've seen this photograph. There's a statue in Washington, D.C. There's debates as to how accurate this photograph was. This photograph right here, this very, very famous photograph, was staged. This is the original photograph. This is the original photograph, and a photographer captured it and then didn't really like the way it was framed, didn't like the way it looked. So he came back the next day and asked some soldiers, not even the same soldiers. I mean, there was a slightly different group of soldiers. He said, "Hey, will you reenact this for me?" So the famous photograph that we all know that has been memorialized in American history, you could say it was unethical because it was staged, right? You could say it was unethical. Stalin, the leader of the former Soviet Union, was notorious for changing photographs and rewriting history, routinely airbrushing out people from old photographs after they fell out of favor. This is a very famous photograph. You may have seen it when people talk about altering history or changing the historical record. This is usually the go-to photograph that they use, that, this is what Stalin did, and we shouldn't try and rewrite history because that's what Stalin did. Here's one from this century, 2010. The Economist magazine got in trouble for this photograph of President Obama, sort of in thought, contemplating what he's going to do about the BP oil spill. That was a big deal, really, really horrible environmental disaster going on in the Gulf of Mexico. They got in trouble for this and got criticized for this. It's kind of a gray area. I mean, the photo editors removed these two individuals, certainly removed this woman right here. She should be in the image on the cover. But the photo editors thought, no, it looks better if Obama is by himself. But that's the original photograph. That's the original photograph. And, I'll leave it to you to debate. Do you think this is acceptable or this is misleading? This one was from a war in Syria. I think this was from 2013. The reporter, no, it was not the reporter, the photographer. Sorry, the photographer who did this manipulation actually lost his job. This to me seems like maybe the guy should not have lost his job over this. Here's the original photograph. You can see a camera in the bottom left. They've removed the camera. That's it. That's it. They've removed the camera. But at the time, this was deemed unacceptable photo manipulation, unethical photo manipulation. I'm just going to go on the record and say, I don't think this is so bad. I think this one's kind of like, okay. This is now we're jumping back to the pre-digital era. This is a photograph of Kent State. Soldiers shot at protesters. They were mostly college students on the campus of Kent State, and students are protesting the Vietnam War, shoot and kill someone. Really dark moment in American history. This is a photograph that's been repeated endlessly and reprinted endlessly. In the original photograph, it looks like she's got a pole coming out of her head. This is just a fence post. It's well behind her. You could see the fence post is behind her, but the way the photographer was lined up, it looks like it's coming out of her head. And I guess someone thought, that doesn't look so good. Let's get rid of that. This would not fly today. Today, this would be considered unethical, and that photographer might lose their job. But at the time, in the 70s, people had different standards. But I just want to stress that, photo manipulation predates digital technology. This, and here we have, now this is not a reputable journalist doing this. This is the celebrity Deborah Messing. She was on a big sitcom, Will and Grace, several years ago. What they're alleging is that Trump is staging a photograph to make himself look like Hitler. Um, Trump did stand in front of a church and hold the Bible upside down very famously. But that image of Hitler is fake. The image of Hitler holding a book is fake. That's the original photograph. So they've added a book to it so that when you put it side by side with Trump, it looks like, Trump and Hitler. Trump and Hitler. No, it's unethical photo manipulation. And I don't know if I want to blame Deborah Messing on this. Maybe she didn't know it was manipulated. I don't know. But, again, I mentioned in an early lecture about don't pass off false information. If you're going to be spreading images on social media, you should take the time to verify if they're accurate or not. Now, here's an ethical question, just an ethical question. There's no yes or no answer. Now we're going to talk about some famous ethical cases. Imagine you're a TV news producer. You obtain video of U.S. soldiers committing war crimes. Would you air this video? That hypothetical question is based on this incident from 1965. Morley Safer, famous journalist from CBS News, and then he later worked for 60 Minutes, which presumably y'all have heard of. He was covering soldiers in Vietnam, and they had a news crew with him. And the soldiers felt like this one village where they couldn't see any they couldn't see anyone fighting. They couldn't see any sort of Viet Cong soldiers. There were women and children there, but they thought that maybe the village was being used to provide cover and safety, and maybe the soldiers were coming out of the jungle and sleeping at night. So they burned down the village. They burned down the village and leave all these families, including elderly people, including women, including children, are now homeless. Soldiers felt like what they were doing was a justified act of war. It looks like U.S. soldiers terrorizing Asian civilians. That's kind of what it looks like. That's probably what it was. And Morley Safer and CBS were really criticized for showing this. Like, how dare you show this? You're hurting the war effort. You're hurting the war effort. Don't air such things. Very, very famous case. Dan Rather was another CBS journalist. He had a long, long career. He actually lost his job when he reported some information that was false. He had false information. The allegation was that former President Bush was able to get out of Vietnam unfairly, that he lied and cheated his way to get out of Vietnam at a time of the draft. And to prove this, he brought forth some military records. I think it was pay stubs or something like that. Those documents were false. And the belief was that Dan Rather was so excited to attack this president, a very conservative president, that he went forth with false information and didn't do his due diligence to verify that, is this information accurate or not? You're saying something negative about the president of the United States, a conservative president whose politics you don't like, but you're doing it with false information. So Dan Rather lost his job. Didn't report for CBS News. I think he still, kept working, and he's still around and still reports podcasts and things like that. But, the big job he had on CBS News, he lost because he did something that was unethical. This is an interesting case too. And I do remember, I'm older than y'all. I do remember this happened. President Clinton, former President Clinton, was having sexual relations with his intern, Monica Lewinsky. Okay, that's true. He has since admitted to it. At the time, Newsweek was doing a story about Clinton and Lewinsky, that maybe Clinton and Lewinsky were having an affair. Newsweek does not report the story because they don't have enough information. Newsweek is doing a good job. The Newsweek reporter is saying, I can't verify this. I don't have enough facts to verify this. We can't publish this. Matt Drudge, who runs the Drudge Report, a website which many of y'all probably know, publishes news. It doesn't do original reporting, just gets headlines from other places and publishes it. Matt Drudge finds out that Newsweek is not doing the story. So he was the one on the Drudge Report that actually broke the story. But the story was, Newsweek has this story. Newsweek is afraid to publish it. Here's what the story says. And then other mainstream media outlets start picking up the Drudge Report saying, hey, here's what Drudge is saying. Here's what Drudge is saying. Later proves to be true. But look at what Drudge originally did. He's reporting that another reporter does not have enough information to make a claim. That to me seems rather shady and rather suspect. This person wants to say this, doesn't say it because they don't have the facts. I'm going to say it for them. A lot of false information could get into public sphere if we allowed this type of reporting to go on, though ultimately it was true. Clinton was doing things with Lewinsky. This is another famous ethical example. Do not do this. Do not do this. Dateline, which was a show on NBC, was doing an expose on GM trucks that they were prone to explode. There was a problem with GM trucks. That's a fact. That has been proven. There was a problem with GM trucks. However, the explosion that Dateline did to show that it was staged, was fake. They put explosives in the car. So the video that the public saw was not real. And NBC and Dateline rightfully got in trouble for this, that, you know, the ultimate truth of what you were saying was true, but you're using false trickery. You know, you're using tricks to show it to the public. That's not right. That's not right. Jason Blair lost his job in 2003. Oh, look, Ruben Studdard, my friend Ruben Studdard right there. I know Ruben. I met Clay too, but I was more friends with Ruben. He loses his job working for the New York Times. It's kind of oh, sorry. Hello? Hey, I'm in the middle of recording a lecture. Can I call you back? Okay, where was I? All right. It's unbelievable that he was able to get away with this for so long. Worked for the New York Times, which is, you know, one of the preeminent, if not the preeminent news outlet in the United States. Whether you disagree with it or not, the New York Times is like, you know, if you got a job with the New York Times, that would be a good thing, right? Your parents and your grandparents would be very happy. Hey, I got a job with the New York Times. My journalism degree paid off. He wasn't just like plagiarizing stuff. He was flat out fabricating things, just completely fabricating. Do not do what Jason Blair did. Another case is the British phone hacking scandal. British tabloids are known for being kind of racy, kind of risque. There's a lot of these British tabloids. They're always at war with the royal family, it seems like. Well, many years ago, some journalists figured out how to hack into someone's voicemail. They couldn't, like, if you were a celebrity, say Hugh Grant, for example, I know Hugh Grant was caught up in this. You couldn't call and listen to Hugh Grant's cell phone, but they figured out a way to get into like Hugh Grant's voicemail, which was a way to get information. And yeah, Prince Harry, he's not a prince anymore. You're right. He's the one that's not a prince, was a prince, not a prince. Okay, yeah, he was involved in this as well. One of the things that they also did, this one was really, really kind of horrible. There was a young woman who had been murdered. She was missing, British woman, and reporters found ways to access her voicemail. Her voicemail was full, so no one could leave a message. So reporters went in and deleted a bunch of voicemail messages so that new voicemails could come in. Well, the woman's family found out about this and then was led to believe that maybe she's alive, because who else would be accessing her voicemail and deleting her voicemail? But anyway, yeah, this was a huge, huge embarrassment. There were some now British laws about libel, defamation, et cetera, are different than the US laws, but there were some huge, huge legal issues going on in England because of this. Cokie Roberts, this is back to the United States now. Cokie Roberts was a reporter on ABC News. She was doing a report from Washington, D.C., and I don't know why it happened. I don't know, rushed, confusion, didn't have the right camera with her at the time. Stages in the ABC News Washington Bureau, stands in front of a green screen, and they put in an image to make it look like she's standing in front of the Capitol building. So it wasn't what she was saying was false. It wasn't that what she was saying was unethical. It was the fact that this was photographed and staged in such a way to make it appear that she was at a location which she was not. Okay, which she was not. That is an unethical thing to do. And then we have this case. Maybe some of you, if you know have been around SDSU for a while, maybe you know this case. It happened in the spring of 2023. There is a video that goes viral of a couple of young women. They appear to be sorority girls. They have that stereotypical sorority girl look. No offense to anyone who's in a sorority right there, but sometimes when you all get together in a group, we can kind of guess that you're a sorority, right? We can kind of tell. These three young women, and they're harassing a food vendor near Viejas Arena. So it's on campus. It's on SDSU campus. They're not like physically attacking the guy, but they're like picking at his food. He's telling him to stop. He's messing with his food, and they're taunting him a little bit, being just like, they seem like drunk, obnoxious. They just seem like drunk, obnoxious people. Anyway, video of this goes viral, and in the video, yeah, here's a screen grab of what I found on Instagram. In the video, someone has named the girls and said, here's their names, and they belong to such and such sorority at SDSU. It was wrong. Whoever made that social media post was wrong. Got the names wrong, misidentified the sorority. They were not actually SDSU sorority girls. So if you are an SDSU sorority, you're off the hook. It wasn't any of y'all. They were affiliated with some other college near here, but not SDSU, and the names were wrong. The Daily Aztec, and I have nothing but love for the Daily Aztec, and I have nothing but love and respect for people who work at the Daily Aztec. I think it's a great, great, wonderful thing to do. But whoever was working at this time went ahead and went with the viral social media story, printed the information, even though it was wrong, even though they hadn't verified it. And the Daily Aztec, got into some trouble. The School of Journalism and Media Studies does not operate the Daily Aztec, but we work closely with them, and and we know many of the people who work there, and they know us as well. So I became aware of this, that this was pretty embarrassing, and this was not something the Daily Aztec should have done. They should have reached out to the women that were named. They should have reached out to the sorority. If they had done that in probably one afternoon or maybe 1 hour, they would have realized, hey, this Instagram video is wrong. It's not correct. Do not repeat incorrect information. And please, please, please take the time to try to verify that. All right, that's what I got. Wrap this up. Okay. And that's it for this lecture.